comments, particularly on the updated allocation for application time frame that was sort of added in this latest round. And we're happy to get written comments. Again, the written comment period will be open until 11:59 p.m. this evening on that, and we certainly want to hear any comments on that today, as well as maybe field some questions that you might have on the rollout. Just for everyone's knowledge, most people have joined this meeting before, so you're familiar with kind of how we operate it. But if you've joined by Google Meets and you have a question or you'd like to make a comment and be heard, please use the raised hand function, which on your screen is in the bottom center. If you are not speaking, please mute your microphone, which is, again, in that control panel all the way to the left. Please limit your comments to about 2 minutes so we can give the maximum number of speakers the opportunity to speak. But again, if you aren't able to make your full comments today, or you have additional follow-up comments that you'd like to make, please take advantage of our written public comment. And again, that is open until 11:59 p.m. today. Before we get in to comments on the event wagering allocation time frame, I just want to let you know, as we said in our release, tentatively, what we are looking to do is file these rules with the Secretary of State on Monday and commence the application process. I mentioned in previous meetings that as we got a little bit closer, we'd be able to give you a little bit more detailed time frame. So I'll go ahead and bring up a presentation and kind of give you an idea of, how the time frame that is in the rules are actually reflected on the actual calendar. So Aaron, if you wouldn't mind, can you stop presenting and I'll go ahead and present my slides? Thank you. Okay, and again, just as a reminder, this is a tentative time frame. There's a couple of assumptions. One is that we are able to go ahead and file the rules with the Secretary of State, and that there are no changes to the time frame. So let's see here. Hopefully not. Okay, great. So again, assuming that we were to go ahead and file with the Secretary of State on Monday, we would open the application period for 10 business days. So that would take us, all applications would need to be filed by August 6th. Moving on, and then Warren, did you say there's an error on this slide?
Yes, so this should be, the department has 5 days to evaluate applicants and announce which parties qualify for licensure.
Okay. So there will be that initial to find out who are the qualified applicants, and then if we need to go into the additional the supplemental allocation application time frame, which the department would then have until the 26th of August and announce allocation of licenses on the 27th. On the 28th, marketing would then be allowed. And then moving on, we would use the supplemental time from basically the 30th of August through the 8th of September to finalize any sort of licensing and certification required as necessary in order to go live tentatively on September 9th. And again, all that is predicated upon the filing on filing on Monday with the Secretary of State's office, and no change to the time frame. Are there any questions on this timeline? I know
we got one from Jonathan Loera.
Okay, Jonathan, go ahead.
Yes, I apologize. I think I missed the first minute or two of that, and I was wondering if this PowerPoints or a presentation, like
yeah. What we'll do is we'll put this out once we're certain when we're filing with the Secretary of State. Again, it's predicated upon filing with the Secretary of State on Monday. And that there's no change to the timeline. That's one of the reasons we kind of haven't put it out there yet. We just want to make sure that the rules are final. But once those things are final, we will update this and make this presentation available.
Thank you very much. And one quick follow-up question. The application itself, when will that be available?
The applications will be available, again, tentatively on this time frame. We would make them available Monday morning. So that's what we're operating under, but it will be the day that they will be available the morning of the day that we're filing with the Secretary of State.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
We have another question from Matt Olin.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yes, good morning. Quick question. I know there was a draft EWFS inquiry letter request put out. For those who've already submitted their request under that draft letter for application, would they have to resubmit, or would those submissions be accepted?
So thanks, Matt, for that question. That was that initial inquiry letter was to kind of help determine which individuals are going to need to file. We'll complete that and get back to you. But all the other forms, all other applications will be available at once. You'll be able to download it. And for those who have questions on which individuals in the organization are going to be required to make disclosures, you can reach out to the department and we will help answer those questions for you. But that initial inquiry letter that you submitted, Matt, was to help determine which individuals in the organizations will need to make disclosures. But all applications, all the forms that are required will become available at once.
Thank you.
You bet.
We have Andrew Diss.
All right, the Andrews. We're getting into the Andrews. Good to see you, Andrew.
Good to see you, Director Vogt. Thank you. My question is about the Secretary of State's office. I'm a little unfamiliar with the process. Do they typically just give approvals when things are submitted, or is there an outside chance Secretary Hobbs' office could take issue with something in the regs?
No, it's ministerial, and from the legislation, since we're exempted from the normal rulemaking process, we're just using that as the mark time that we have filed what we consider the final rules to move forward through this process. But I want to remind everybody, and we've repeated this throughout these public comment periods, the exemption from rulemaking that was granted to the department by the event wagering legislation, the fantasy sports regulations, the department is exempted for 1 calendar year, so until April 15th of 2022. And we've always said, as we move through these rules, if we find out through this process that there is something in our rules that need to be adjusted, we will have the opportunity to do so in that time frame very quickly. But we're just marking time when we file these rules with the Secretary of State, that's when we're opening the application period and moving forward.
All right, next up we have Mark Starr.
Go ahead, Mark.
Hello, Director Vogt. I know that you've been focusing mainly on the operators, the event wagering licensees, but will the applications for suppliers and management services providers be available this coming Monday, assuming that everything goes as planned?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, so a little bit about the applications that are for event wagering. In an effort to make sure that we're hitting our time frame and that we're not slowing this process down. In addition to the applications that need to be submitted, we are also asking the teams, the tribes, and the limited event wagering operators, they will be asked to submit a supplemental allocation application where they will have the opportunity to detail how they fit the 19 criteria that were set out in the rules in the chance that we end up having more than 10 qualified applicants on either the sports side or the tribal side or the limited event wagering operator side. So we're asking that all of that be submitted during this 10-day period, so that as we move through and we make that initial evaluation, we will have the information there to move into that supplemental allocation decision if necessary. All right, moving on with just to give you now the sort of the timeline of how this works out for fantasy sports. Again, assuming we file Monday with the Secretary of State and start the clock. You can see this is a little bit of an eye chart for me, so I'm going to have to switch to my bifocals. I apologize. But application period concludes on the same day, which is August 6th. We'll move through the licensing and certification period with those licensees, with our tentative go live date of August 28th for fantasy sports in Arizona. Are there any questions on that time frame?
We have Andrew Winchell.
Andrew, go ahead.
I think you're on mute, Andrew.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thank you again for walking us through this. Just a quick question on fantasy. Is there ability to go do marketing earlier than August 28th in the same way that the fantasy sport or the sports betting does is earlier?
Ask your question again.
Yeah.
Are you talking just about marketing or?
Yes, on marketing. So yes, so there was a recognition, I think, when you were going through Sportsbook that you could begin marketing on the 28th and then with the expectation of going live by the 9th. Is there a similar earlier marketing period for fantasy?
Let me go back and check. Let me get you that answer.
Okay.
I don't see it on the calendar here, but we'll check and we'll get back, and we'll release a more updated calendar publicly for everybody to see once we're certain what the time frame is and when we're filing with the Secretary of State. So we'll make sure we make that clear in the rules, okay, or in the calendar.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Liv Bieselmans.
Yes, hi, Director. Thank you very much for sharing this information. I quickly wanted to go back to the event wagering in relation to the date of the 28th of August. It's mentioned that marketing is allowed, but account creation is available as well for event wagering. But I understand that you cannot go live before the 8th of September. What does account creation refer to?
I'm going to go ahead and have Warren take that question.
Thank you, Director. Yeah, so what's allowed on the 28th is all marketing, and then also you can begin to sign up players on your platform. So you're not actually taking any wagers, but you can sign up players starting on the 28th.
Okay, and would that include players already depositing money into their account but not using it to place wagers, or is it just the registration process?
Just the registration process.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Liv. Any further questions? All right. Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing this. And again, as a reminder, once we've got the actual go live and we've taken a look at everyone's comments, we'll go ahead and update those slides, make them publicly available with some of those questions that were raised, and we'll go from there. All right. At this time, we'll move into the public comment period. And again, we were actively soliciting any sort of input that folks had on the updated allocation, allotment or allocation updated time frame. Any comments regarding what the department is proposing on that front? All right. For those of you who are joining by the phone, in case you have questions, feel free to send an email to publicaffairs@azgaming.gov. Please give your first and last name and who you represent. And then when you're called upon, go ahead and unmute and speak. And then just again, for the record, go ahead and identify yourself again, first name, last name, who you represent. Any inputs on the time frame? Okay. Well, we'll just go kind of open it up to more general questions. Are there any questions on sort of commencing this or the rollout? Any questions that folks have?
We have Andrew Diss.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you again, Director. Andrew Diss with Arizona Coyotes. I just wanted to return to privilege fees, which we touched on during our last meeting. You know, when I asked some questions about that, you mentioned that the department's reasoning for the differing rates between retail and mobile is because you looked at other states as an example and what the costs associated with running mobile operations are and how they're generally cheaper than retail. But I just wanted to point out that the example of other states by pointing out that, you know, there's currently about 30 or so jurisdictions that have operating sports betting, or like Arizona, they're preparing to launch. And out of those states, only a handful have actually implemented different rates for retail and mobile. So I would say it's the exception rather than the norm to see different structures for retail and mobile. And as for the costs, you know, operating mobile operations, I agree with your statement. However, we don't really start to see that bear out, that it's actually cheaper until a few years into a state's operations. You know, the reality of sports betting and the lessons to be learned from other states is that this is a relatively low margin business compared to other forms of gaming. And it takes about 3 years or so for handle to grow to a point where operators are going to be in the black and they start to turn a profit. So, you know, mobile operations, they're capital intensive. When we first stand them up, it includes purchasing servers, hardware, hiring staff to run the back of house, and then of course there's the marketing spend. You know, all this is to say that while operational costs for mobile wagering may come down to a point where they are lower than retail operations, it's going to take a while for that to occur. So, you know, just two last things I'll make real quick about that point. Another thing you have to take into consideration is what rates are surrounding states at. You know, currently our next door neighbor, Nevada, has a flat 6.75% rate on both retail and mobile. And for Arizona to propose a 10% rate for mobile, I just think we're putting ourselves at a disadvantage when operators are considering how much they want to invest in a state that has a 48% higher tax rate than right next door. More money will naturally flow into the state with the higher ROI. And the last point I'll make, and I think, you know, from your time at the legislature, you're well aware of this, Director Vogt, but I think we need to be honest with ourselves about the real reason why the legislature worded the legislation the way that they did to direct the department to consider the highest tribal rate when setting the privilege fee, rather than actually setting that rate in statute. And that's because they were afraid they were going to trigger a Prop 108 2/3 requirement. The Coyotes, we've been part of this process from the get-go, and every discussion we had during the legislative process was that there was serious concern about getting enough support to pass the bill, and including an explicitly spelled out rate of 8% would trigger that Prop 108. In hindsight, it didn't end up mattering because the bill cleared both houses with broad support. But in light of 108, it's clear that the legislative intent was there to be a uniform rate of 8%. So I just wanted to circle back to that. I wanted to get that on the record for everybody to hear. I just hope that the department reconsiders the privilege fees, and I hope that you're willing to set them both at 8%, or at the very least, let's wait a few years until operations get to the level where operators are actually in the black before we take a look at having a difference between an 8% and a 10% mobile and retail rate. So I thank you for your time, Director.
Great, thank you, Andrew. I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, next up we have Matt Olin.
Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, Director, appreciate the opportunity. Separate from Andrew's questions, we're still trying to understand the language as it relates to the two platforms, single system, and wanting to ensure that those two platforms, we've heard comment that one would be mobile and one would be retail. We'd like to get clarification as to whether they could both be mobile or whether one would be mobile and one would be retail. And with that, I might have another comment.
Okay. Again, we put the definition in the rules. I mean, is there a confusion on the definitions in there of how we're defining it?
I guess from our side, we're trying to understand whether or not the two platform scenario would include two mobile with a single server, or whether specifically it would be one mobile and one retail.
Warren, you want to take that one? Because I believe we spelled it out in there on retail versus mobile.
Right. So the definition of event wagering platform is the internet interface to a single event wagering system, which is designed to accept mobile event wagers through a website and or a mobile application. So if you can have more than one platform, you could potentially have a website or a mobile application, but they all have to report to a single event wagering system.
Thank you. I think that clarifies. Thank you.
Did you have a comment? I know you said you might have another comment.
No, I think you answered the question, so I appreciate that. That's all I had. Thank you.
All right. Moving on.
All right, next up we have Conley Schulte.
Go ahead.
I apologize. Can you hear me?
You're a little hard to hear. Can you try that again?
Can you hear me now?
Not really.
I submitted my question via email.
Okay.
If you can't hear me so well.
All right, we'll have our public affairs team check to see if we've got your question that I think you said you submitted it by mail. Max, do you have that question?
Yes. He asked if we can clarify how an event wagering and limited event wagering license application will be made available.
Yes, all applications will be made available on our website on the day we go. So right now we're operating under the assumption that we're going to file our rules with the Secretary of State on Monday. If that happens, all applications will be made available on the website.
Okay, thank you very much.
You bet.
Okay, Amy Lynn Pierce.
Thanks. Hi, Director. I just wanted, Amy Lynn Pierce from the Diamondbacks. I just wanted to echo and go on the record as agreeing with Andrew from the Coyotes about the rate. I think that the legislation that we passed does a great deal to level the playing field with Arizona and the surrounding states that have adopted sports gaming. And I want to just make sure that we don't put ourselves at a disadvantage in this rulemaking process by having fees that are higher than the states around us, like Andrew said. So I just wanted to add my support for that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Emmeline.
No further questions right now.
All right.
Oh, we have Andrew Winchell.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Thank you, Director Andrew Winchell from FanDuel. Sorry for not identifying myself before.
All right.
One of the couple of things, I'll start with the first, just to thank you for doing all these forums and going into the deeper discussions. On Sportsbook specifically, on the language related to official league data, I'd like to thank the department for making some changes from the previous versions to the new versions and the acknowledgement of specific criteria for commercially reasonable determinations. But there still appears to be, as it's written, a presumption of the requirement to use the official league data, and that the operator would have to prove the viability, I guess, of the alternative data sources. And in most other jurisdictions, the discussion or the filings that go to the regulator are about the commercial reasonableness of the official league data. And there's a presumption that the operators are basically allowed to use whatever source that they deem appropriate, unless there is the filing by the sports governing body and that their commercial reasonableness is upheld. Rather than, as these rules appear to be written, there's the filing by the sports governing body saying we have this data available, it's going to be used, and then the operator needs to file if they want proof that their alternative solution is meets some level of standards by the department. And I guess I would urge the department to look to Illinois, Michigan, and Virginia in the way that all three of those states have kind of mirrored each other as far as this process.
Okay, great. Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Glenn Feldman, go ahead.
Glenn, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I had a question concerning the difference between a management services provider and a designee. As far as I can tell, management services provider is not a defined term. Designee is, and designee is defined as a person who, let me see here, a person who has responsibility for the management and control of event wagering operations. So I'm curious as to what the distinction is between a management services provider and a designee.
I'm going to go ahead and have Warren. You want to address that one?
Yes. So management services provider is defined in statute. So I would encourage you to look up there. It is definition 11 in the statute. A person that operates, manages, or controls event wagering authorized by this chapter on behalf of an event wagering operator or limited event wagering operator, including developing or operating event wagering platforms and providing odds, lines, and global risk management, and may provide services to more than one licensed event wagering operator or licensed limited event wagering operator.
So isn't there significant overlap then between management services provider and designee?
I would say probably not. I mean, your designee by definition in the rules is acting as, once they have been authorized by the qualified operator, they're acting as the licensee. So your management services provider is just providing services to the licensee if they don't use a designee.
Okay, I'll go back and reread it. Thank you.
And Glenn, before you mute, just for the record, can you identify who you are affiliated with or who you represent?
The Cocopa Indian tribe.
Okay, great. Thanks, Glenn.
And Ted, one more thing if I can add is that the limited event wagering operators they do not have the ability to use a designee.
Thanks for that clarification.
No other questions right now. Oh, we just have Andrew Diss.
Yeah, thank you, Director Vogt. Warren, maybe you're the best person to answer this. Under 119 Systems and Platforms, C, you make reference to responsible parties may use more than one and up to two platforms, and then it's up to the responsible party to submit the request to the department prior to asking for that second platform. In the department's mind, who is that responsible party? Is it who the team selects to be its operating partner? Are they the one, or do you expect the team to make that request if there's going to be a second platform?
Yes, so responsible party is a defined term. It's definition 24 under 101. Responsible party means the event wagering operator, designee, limited event wagering operator, and management services provider. So whoever is that person that's essentially running the operation that's asking for that second platform would be the one to make that request.
Okay, I got it. Thanks, Warren. Thank you for clearing that up.
Glenn, did you raise your hand again, or is that from your previous question?
For my previous question, I guess I need to unmute. There we go.
There, thank you.
Sure.
All right. I'm sorry, Aaron, I stepped on you.
No, I was going to say no other questions, but we just had Christy Hubbard.
Hi, Christy.
Hi, with Louis Roca. We had a question on the calculation of time. Based on the Rule 153 and computing in a period prescribed or allowed by the Act of this article, the day of the Act, event, or default from which the designated period begins to run shall not be included. So when we had looked at tentative dates, we ran 10 days out if the application period began the 26th, that it would end August the 9th. But your chart says August the 6th. We did not include the 26th based on that first sentence. Do you not read it that way?
We include the 26th.
All right, thank you.
You bet.
All right, next up, Kevin Cochran.
Hi, Kevin.
Hey, Director Vogt. This is Kevin Cochran with DraftKings. We just wanted to raise one point around fantasy sports and advertising as it deals with responsible gaming. Just one of the requirements in Rule 226A2 limits or requires that advertisements have a responsible gaming message with the statewide toll-free crisis hotline number or another toll-free crisis helpline number. We are asking that, since fantasy sports is not considered gambling under the states or under the authorizing law, and this is not a requirement that fantasy sports operators face in other jurisdictions, that we be able to, if the department would still like to see responsible gaming messaging on these advertisements, that it be limited to advertisements that are only placed within Arizona. Otherwise, it could greatly impact the fantasy sports operators' advertising campaigns as they run nationally. We do have some disclosures on here, but it talks about just that certain restrictions do apply. So we would just ask the department to once again consider this change. It would make Arizona the only state in the U.S. that would require us to do something like this on all national advertising. It would be a very expensive undertaking for us, especially for something that is not defined as gambling in the Authorizing Act.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kevin.
All right, next up we have Liv Biesmans.
Yes, Director, I should also have identified myself earlier. Liv Biesman speaking on behalf of Unibet. Two questions in relation to launch timelines for retail and online. Do I understand correctly that both operations obviously have to target a 9th of September go live date, but is it possible for operators, if for some reason there's delays in the retail and or the mobile, to operate both products or channels at different times, as long as it's within the 6-month deadline?
Yes.
Okay.
So we understand that with retail, there could be things that take a little bit longer, but you know, we're looking for that go live date of September 9th.
Okay, no, that's clear. And then the second one is on the deadline for the license application. if operators for some reason would miss that 6th of August cutoff date, I assume there are no exemptions that can be made.
Correct.
Okay.
To get in that sort of the assurance of hitting the go live date of the 9th. I mean, certainly they could follow on later, but
okay,
there are a couple factors in there too. You know, it depends with allocation, etc.
Yeah, thank you.
You bet.
Okay, no further questions right now. Andrew Winchell.
Hi, thank you, Director. Again, Andrew Winchell from FanDuel. I have 3 items that kind of touch both on fantasy sports and sportsbook that have similar issues. One is in relation to both sportsbook and fantasy. There's been edits in some sections, but not in all of them, as it relates to the validation of a customer winning either a event wager or a fantasy contest, and that they have to be paid out immediately upon validation and verification. I saw that added verification language in some sections, but not all. Is that verification supposed to include or reference all the additional potential checks, which may include delinquent debt set-off checks, W2G reporting, you know, any other AML or fraud checks that might have to happen? Is that why the verification is added? Because I think that would be very helpful for us if that was the purpose, to ensure that we are still compliant for paying out immediately, even while conducting those required pieces.
I'll go ahead and turn it over to Warren, but before I do, what section are you looking at? Is there
so I think I have the old reference here. It might not be the same. I apologize. So like in fantasy contests, it's rule R194213D. I think in the previous version, it might not be the same in this current version.
Okay.
Upon verifications, winnings from fantasy sports contest entry shall be immediately deposited into the player account.
Yes. Warren, go ahead.
Yes, so we added that language to give you, the operators, the most flexibility possible. So it's whatever verifications are necessary for you guys, federal tax, whatever it is, that's what we added that language for. And I don't believe we missed any. If we did, please let us know. We thought we tied them all up as being verified. So if you could, please do.
Yeah,
perfect.
Yeah, so if there are, go ahead and draw our attention to it in the written comments.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, just to follow up on that, there's, in a similar vein, there's a requirement throughout that withdrawal processing, and then also for payment of event wagering tickets by mail, that there are timelines for which the operator needs to make that payment. And they actually reference, I believe, that the customer needs to receive funds within that timeline. And so our concern is, even if someone mailed in a winning event wagering ticket and we turned around and cut a check the same day, we aren't necessarily able to exercise control over the common carrier or the postal service on making sure that that check actually gets into the hands of the customer within the timeline. And the same with withdrawals from accounts, where we might be able to process it, even if we process it immediately upon request, if there is a delay by either a third-party payment processor or the actual customer's own financial institution in receiving it, like, as for example, if there's a hold placed on it for X number of days by their bank, we'd like kind of clarity that would be not counted against the timeline.
Yeah, I think the way we look at it is upon the action that you guys take, but we can go back and take a look and see, if there's any way we can clarify that.
Okay.
So if I can jump in on that one, just to be clear, what that section says is redemption by mail shall be accepted, and payment shall be made by the responsible party no later than 10 days after receipt. So we tried to clarify that all you have to do is essentially, if you're doing a check, write the check and mail it out. We didn't want a built-in time for the mail. We tried to give as much flexibility there, but it does not include the actual mail time. You can mail them overseas, you can mail them wherever.
Right.
Build that in, but yes, as long as you can
So
payment,
your option.
yes, we completed our process, then we're good.
Okay, that should be enough, right? Just the clarification was proper, perfect.
Okay, no other questions right now?
All right, we'll go ahead and survey. If there's anyone on the phone, again, you got a question, you can either send in the email or, while we've kind of got some dead space here, is there anyone on the phone that has questions or comments on the timeline for event wagering, or any questions on implementation?
We have Andrew Winchell.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Sorry, I want to give other people the chance. So I just said the one last one from my side is on the financial audit in both event wagering and in fantasy. There was a I think we had previously suggested, and I just want to touch base on this, is the ability to have the parent company of the licensee submit their audited financial statements, because depending on the ownership structure of the entity being licensed, the base level entity might not actually provide or have annually audited financial statements, whereas the parent company might be able to provide that on an easier basis. So I guess that would be our previous suggestion. Our current suggestion is to allow for the parent company of the licensed entity to provide audited financial statements.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Callie Varner, go ahead.
Hi, yes, I'm Callie Varner. I'm the editor at ArizonaCasinos.com. So my question is, and it may have already been asked because I missed the first 20 minutes because of the big storm we're having, but what about I thought I read somewhere where you cannot use an app to place a bet while on Indian tribe land?
Correct. Correct. Mobile is authorized through the statute off reservation.
Gotcha. Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
You bet. Any other questions? All right. Well, I said this last week, and I just want to echo it. I really appreciate everyone's participation in this. And in sort of the collaborative nature we've approached drafting these rules. I think it's been very helpful. The department really thanks all the feedback we've gotten. We've received hundreds of pages of input. We've got hours of this virtual feedback that has been very, very helpful. And, for every comment that's been put in one way, we've probably received a comment arguing the other side. The department's done its best to resolve these discrepancies in the most responsible and efficient way possible in order to move forward to create a great set of rules to conduct event wagering and fantasy sports in the state of Arizona. Like I said at the beginning of this, and as I've echoed throughout this process, we view you as partners. We like to keep this collaboration going. And as we stand up this new industry in the state, and I understand that not everybody's going to be 100% happy with the rules or how the department resolve things, but I ask you to work with us as we move through this. Let's keep the discussion going. We are exempted from the normal rulemaking process until April 15th of 2022. And if, as we're moving through this, we find that there are things that need to be addressed or addressed in a different way, we'll have the opportunity to do that. But I think what's important is to keep the communication going that we've established. And again, thank you everybody for participating in this. And I would really like to thank the legislature and the governor. One of the things when we started talking with our counterparts in other jurisdictions, they told us the one thing you're going to want in drafting these rules is latitude. And I think the governor and the legislature did a great job. They gave the department a lot of authority in coming up with these rules. What they did ask is that we do it in the light of the public. I think we've accomplished that here, and I'm very pleased with this process and the outcome. And you guys have made this a success. So thank you to the legislature and Governor Ducey for trusting us with this. And again, our plan is we're going to go ahead, or public comment will be open until 11:59 p.m. this evening. Please feel free to reiterate your comments there, or if you want to expound upon them, please do so. We'll take a look at it, and we will announce if we are going to go forward and file with the Secretary of State on Monday. And whenever we file with the Secretary of State, all applications will be available for immediate download on our website, and we'll move forward from there. And we'll also post that updated time frame and that timeline so that people kind of know how we're moving out from here. So with that, I'll ask if there are any questions or any comments before we conclude our final public comment session. All right. Thank you, everybody, and we'll be in contact soon.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Director.